Hello, and welcome to this new episode of Alive and Teaching. Is there a one and only way to assess our students, or should we consider that there are many ways to doing it, more so when we know that each field, each discipline can have its own specificities? The idea for this episode came out of a discussion that I've been participating to with some of my colleagues, where many of them have been referring to the way they are organizing their classes and to the challenges even that they are facing when it comes to making it sure that students are learning something in this world that is more and more dominated by habits that rely on AI. So what can we understand from this and how can we move forward? Let's see if we can have at least an agreement on some specifics. Let's go. So one important thing to mention to start with is the fact that not all fields or not all disciplines are alike. Obviously, science or sciences such as mathematics, such as mechanics and engineering happen to be different from social sciences, from philosophy, from history, from political science. So I am not sure that we can build on a one and only way of transmitting teaching or transmitting knowledge and or of assessing students. At the same time, I think that what is common to all of us is the fact that we are facing many challenges. So in a discussion that I was part of recently, there were colleagues coming from different fields, one from journalism, the other one from political science, and a colleague from psychology. And it was interesting to see how the approach to the challenges that we are facing today happened to be different from from one to another. Meaning that, for example, coming from journalism, the obvious is that journalists are quite worried when it comes to seeing what many of their students could be providing when they rely on AI. Why? Because there are sequences, there is a way of writing for AI that happens to be, I would say, detected at one point when it comes to reading what is provided. I can remember this example of one of my colleagues that said that, okay, look at this assessment that has come from one of my students. You can see in his or her description that most, if not all, what was there was definitely based on AI. So there is a way of detecting this, and of course this, I would say, takes away the human touch that we are expected to see in an article, in a good article that we read provided by a journalist. Besides, I can think also of this psychology aspect, and here there were many interesting things because my colleagues from psychology went on, I would say, adapting her own way of giving assignments to her students depending on what she was teaching, on what they were talking about. I could see that there were many ways of trying to figure out what would be the best way to get them to learning something. And I would say that what was interesting really that I got the impression that it works at least to a certain extent, meaning that when you put your energy into activities, into things organized with students where they have to provide something on the moment and where they have to prove that the knowledge that they have in mind happens to be injected somehow in a result, this is where you see that a big part even, of our teaching duty happens to give something to students. And then the third example that I was referring to was of a colleague in political science that was also interesting in the way he was definitely putting lots of energy, lots of efforts into following the work of his students, especially when it came to methodology and research paper. But at the same time here, one of the agreement that we had is that it is very good to see how involved this teacher is towards his students, but I mean, maybe this is something also that has to be to be considered or reconsidered depending on the context that we're talking about. What I mean here is that, and I've mentioned this in episodes before, it is different to have a class of 10 students and then to have a class of 30 students. Obviously, the more students you have, the less it becomes easy or even effective to follow up on the work of all of them. So that means that we must maybe consider the best ways that we can explore in order for us to allow the energy that we put there, and there is a lot of energy that is put there, to benefit the students in a context also that does not revert against the teacher, meaning that does not get the teacher to have to not only put his focus in the class in itself, but also have to assess and check and recheck things outside of class. I think that this definitely doesn't really make sense. The best is for us to find the ways to guarantee an environment where we know that the part of the knowledge or part of what we want to transmit to students happens to get there within the class, but also with them getting prepared outside of class. And this is another point that I would like to mention here or to develop based on my own experience. So when it comes to assessing students and to giving them assignments, there is no one way of doing it. There is no two ways of doing it. There are 1,000 ways and more to doing it, meaning that once again, there is no one solution that works for all. I think that it really depends on each of us and on the way we consider our classes, the way we consider the organization of our classes, as well as what we feel is important to transmit to them. One dimension that I won't mention today, but that I will get back to in a near future, is the real challenge brought by AI and how this is conditioning even the way of thinking of our students. This is something that is key, definitely, and I think most of us are facing this challenge. I am also aware of the fact that, of course, when it comes to a discipline such as computer and science and coding, we know that more and more coding is being made by AI, and this brings an additional pressure and challenge on the teachers in themselves. But then there are other fields at the same time that allow us to be a kind of lab, because this is where, bringing it to my field, to political science, I would say that I'm confident that there are techniques and there are ways of proceeding that get at least students to be prepared and to get some knowledge based on the topics that we are discussing together. So here, for example, what I stopped doing is committing students to reading before classes without assessing them when they are in the classroom. And this is the main change that happened there, meaning that what I do with students is that I give them things to prepare before the class, but then I tell them they have to come prepared to the class, and this is where I would say the big assessment happens. And here there are two ways that I'm considering or that I'm using when it comes to making it sure that students are following the right track. At least in my standards, that would be the right track. One of these is for them to be assessed at the beginning of the class with me, I would say, touring randomly the classroom based on a question that I had to think of and telling them, okay, you read the reference or you watched it, depending on what they had to prepare, and there was this question, what can you tell me about it? The fact that it's random obviously gets them to have to be prepared to being designated in a particular moment. There was even a time when I used to use a tool called the Wheel of Names, which is a tool that you project on the screen. It has the names of everybody, and you just make it run, and it randomly determines a student. And you can allow it to run as much as you want, and to make it more fun, I even include my name, so that if it falls on me, then I have to answer the question. So this is one of the assessments, or one of the ways of making it sure that students are prepared. Then the other one consists in quizzes. And while I've been very reluctant to use the multiple choice questions all through my career of teaching, the fact is that I got to it now. Meaning that multiple choice questions happen to be a way to effectively and efficiently assess or make it sure that students have prepared or not. And honestly, it works really, meaning that the ones that haven't prepared happen not to be able to choose answers that fit correctly with what is expected from them. Randomly could happen. They could not have an idea about an answer at the same time put something that works, but in general it doesn't work that way. So this is where we have this I would say we have this technique that happens to work, at least in my experience, once again. And then one thing to add to this is that this is not enough, of course. So this is where I bring another dimension, depending on my classes. Some classes have a presentation, a group presentation, as a strong assessment combined with also they're writing a short paper after the presentation where they have to talk about two things. One is the content that they've been working on for the paper, and the other point is their own experience brought to the group and brought to the paper. So this is where they have to put of themselves, something of themselves, in order for them to prove that they have been providers within the paper. I'm not saying that they won't use AI, and actually I even tell them you can use AI, but at the same time I want to see your opinion and your experience reflected in the paper, and once again, so far it works. In other classes, I use other techniques. One of them is having them working on a collaborative project, as we call it, meaning a project that they work on together. We organize workshops from time to time, and these workshops are a way for me to see how they're working on it, to see what they are providing, and to make it sure that they provide something at the end of the semester that is their own product. What product? It's an artifact, as we call it, that could be a podcast, that could be a UN resolution, or a draft with the structure of a UN resolution, anything that would allow them to prove that they are involved into the world's affairs. I am still following up on things when it comes to this. The experience is quite recent, but I can say definitely that this combination of seeing them providing something orally in the class, basing my classes on discussions, but knowing that they have prepared something, and this brought in combination, as I was saying, or brought together with having them providing something where they have to put of themselves. I'm not sure it is the magical formula or the perfect solution, but some of it is working because I can see over semesters that at least some knowledge is kept within them. And I think that this is one of the strong objectives that I care about. And so at the end of the day, is there a magic formula for assessing? I am repeating myself. We cannot assess students based on a one and only formula. It depends on what we want to do and what we want to see reflected in them. But one thing that I am sure of is the fact that there are two key words that should keep in our minds when it comes to making it sure that students are doing or providing something that corresponds to what we are expecting from them. One is the what, meaning what do I want them to retain at the end of a class? What are the key ideas that I want them to retain? There was a point where I was considering really doing without slides, and then I've been asking them about their expectations. I see that many students still feel more comfortable having something projected, something coming from the teacher, even though it's some bullet points. So that's what I do now. But I add something more, meaning that at the end of the class, at the end of each class, or almost each class, or at least the main topics, I also build a memo that I give them, that I upload or I send to them. Why? Because I tell them, if you understand what is in the memo, if you make it sure that if there is something in the memo you don't understand correctly, you make your own research and you're going to be asked about it anyway afterwards, this is where you will have the key ideas that I care about you understanding and that you will care about understanding well if you want to provide something that makes sense within the exam or the quizzes that I would ask from you. So the what you want to transmit is very important. But then it comes with another bit. And this other bit is the how you transmit it. And this is where I get back to the point that I was developing before. I think that as long as we are comfortable developing means that show to us that they are providing something in the moment, this is where the how happens to be the thing that works or not. Meaning that I've been exploring one way or another, I'm not sure it always worked. This is where I had to renew. This is where I will still have to renew in the future some of the things that I'm using, and I will be happy sharing them with you. But for the time being, what I can see is that this how that I am using, where I am lucky to be able to base myself more on discussions and oral points rather than to get them writing constantly, is something that is providing some fruits, I would say, or providing some results at least. We're gonna see if things keep that way, of course, on the long run. So that was it for today. Thank you very much for listening or watching this new episode of Alive and Teaching. Do not hesitate and follow us on the different means that you have there, YouTube, Spotify, or even by subscribing to our newsletter on aliveandteaching.com, so that you can have updates about the new content that is put on the website or that is put on social media. And by next time, take good care. Bye bye.